Perfect. All right. So many different IT buttons and switches, and we'll get there. Um, One, we appreciate NIU for hosting us tonight. Two, we have a number of partners that were a part of the discussion in bringing this together tonight. So we have in the back, we've got Jen Kuroda, who's part of Sinnissippi Audubon. Thank Jen. Julie, where's Julie? Okay. Julie Urim, who you probably ran into on your way in, is the executive director at Nature at the Confluence, which is up in South Beloit. You've got, where's Brad? Oh, Brad's in the back. Brad Roos at Sustain Rockford. We've got, where's Jesse? There you are. Jesse Crow-Mormel, who is connected with all of us in some form or fashion. I think tonight you're here as Friends of Nature Preserves and board chair at Nature at the Confluence. Yeah, she's connected with all of us in some form or fashion. And then we've got, let's see, Christina, and I'm gonna butcher your last name. Nanicelli, from Illinois Environmental Council. So, and she will be splitting this presentation with me tonight, and providing a lot of the statewide information about data centers. Just a quick housekeeping thing. The bathrooms are actually across the lobby. So if you need to use the restroom, they're across the lobby and kind of to the left and to your right. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Anne. Can folks hear us on the Zoom? Can I get some head nods? I see a couple of video faces here. All right, I see a couple of nods. Okay, and hello in the room here. It's great to see so many folks come out on a weekday night during dinner hour. Much appreciated. I'm Christine Anicelli. I technically work for Sierra Club, Illinois, but a proud member of Illinois Environmental Council and the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. So we have a broad statewide network of environmental and community partners working to tackle some of our biggest challenges in the environmental space and the energy space here in Illinois. And data centers has certainly emerged as one of the most challenging and important things that we do need to address. And so looking forward to sharing some high-level trends with folks. What are we seeing at a bird's eye view across Illinois about what we're seeing from data center development across the country? And what protections really need to be in place at both a local and a statewide level, so that folks can have a good sense of how to engage in these conversations and hold our elected officials accountable to making sure that we have really thoughtful conversations as these more and more of these projects come into our local communities. Let's see. All right. So Anne walked through a couple of the partners here. So I've got lay of the land. And some state and local action. And then I'll turn it back over to Anne to talk about what we know and don't know about the local proposal. So first off, how many folks have heard of data centers? All right. Okay. All right. Everyone has. So, I mean, data centers are really these buildings, a physical building facility that house tons of IT infrastructure. Computers, all of these different types of things that help to power the digital world. There's about a 90% chance my 5-year-old daughter is streaming a movie right now at home off of Netflix, hopefully an appropriate one. And that is the type of data and streaming services, among many other types of things that need computing power and data center facilities. So a few different types of physical requirements we need to see in these facilities: computer chips to do the computing, energy. We'll talk a lot about this. Data centers are probably the most energy intensive power users we have ever seen. We've never seen an energy user quite like this, and it is a major challenge that needs to be addressed. Water. These facilities are incredibly water intensive. We'll talk a lot about that. And land. Land is one of the most important things that a data center and a developer need. And why we're seeing so many conflicts start to happen in local city councils and in zoning boards around land acquisition. These guys need land, and that's why they're knocking on so many doors in Illinois. And I think, we've had data centers for a period of time now, but something that is emerging and new is technology has grown, and we're starting to see now smarter and smarter technology. We're seeing generative AI, artificial intelligence. How many folks have heard of Chat GPT? Good. A lot. There we go. And this type of computing is incredibly energy intensive and is starting to shift from what were, maybe smaller, medium-sized data centers to now we're seeing incredibly massive data centers that are called hyperscalers. And to give folks a little bit of a sense of scale here, there are two proposed data centers, one in Yorkville, one in the city of Joliet. Both sizes, those are not the only proposed. There's over 200 proposed in Illinois. But these two are unique in that the size and scale, 1.8 gigawatts. What's a gigawatt? It's a measure of energy intensity. And to give, that is basically the amount of energy that the city of St. Louis uses. Just want folks to sit with that for a second. It's like plugging the city of St. Louis into our power grid in Illinois. So the energy intensity here and the scale and the size of some of these projects are unprecedented. And Illinois is one of the top targeted states in the country for data center development. We'll talk about why that is here in a second. And what we see in terms of all the different developer applications that are knocking on the doors of ComEd and Ameren and other municipal utilities as well, is the amount of applications that we're seeing and the amount of energy that they are proposing to bring onto the grid, essentially doubling the size, the energy intensity, and the use of Illinois' power grid. We've never seen this before, and it's physically, frankly, impossible to connect all of these different users to the grid. But more and more of them are connecting, and we need to make sure that there are critical protections in place because that energy intensity comes with a lot of challenges. So a couple of things on why Illinois. I mean, the Midwest in general is an important hotspot. Access to water in the Great Lakes, really important. Access to major metropolitan areas, another important aspect of this. Proximity to clients and companies, users, is an important aspect. Fiber optics networks and where there are strong internet services, strong power grid, transmission lines, land, flat land, which we have an abundance of here in Illinois. And up until, well, they're still technically in place, but for the last couple of years, we have had generous tax incentives looking to welcome this type of investment into Illinois. So for a lot of different reasons, Illinois has a very unique and attractive spot for data center development. And even if tax incentives, which the governor has proposed to pause, go away, we fully anticipate that data center development will continue full tilt. So we'll talk about a couple of different categories of impacts. These are not the only impacts by any means, but these are some of the emerging trends. And on the first, want to present this in a fair light. Here are some of the the attractions that we have heard repeatedly from stakeholders that are interested in bringing these types of projects to Illinois, to local communities. The first is the economic benefit of short-term jobs. These are typically union, good-paying construction jobs. Takes a lot of folks to build these types of facilities over the course of, a couple of years. Some of the questions here that we have are, how many long-term jobs, though, ultimately come with these types of projects? And it varies, and that's a really important question that local communities need to talk about with local developers, and ultimately the companies that are going to house, be the owners of those facilities. Another sort of, kind of broader existential question is, well, as more and more AI processes happen, and that technology grows, what's that impact on our broader economy? Will we ultimately lose a number of jobs because they are now able to be done by computers and artificial intelligence? It's a question that starts to come up in these conversations. And ones that don't, that's one in particular that doesn't have an easy answer, but things that are coming up. But make no mistake, the short-term construction jobs are a particular unique interest that we hear time and time again, and we see organized labor and unions fighting really hard for those. The second major piece is tax revenue. As more and more communities want to see, obviously, more tax revenue come in, provide more services to local communities, this is an important attraction that has garnered a fair amount of interest. And bipartisan interest as well. On the other side of the coin, we'll start with water. These guys are incredibly water intensive. And it's not just from on-site use for the cooling of technology at the facility. It is off-site power generation. As you can perhaps imagine, the most water-intensive power resources: nuclear, coal, gas. The more energy intensive and the more fossil fuel and nuclear reliant a facility like this is, the more indirect water use there's going to be with it. So we have both on-site and off-site water use. Data centers have been very resistant to transparently reporting water. And in those conversations that some of us have had with them, ultimately, a lot of it comes down to trade secrets. This is such a competitive industry right now, and the way to maximize, every dollar and cent spent, and how to, operationalize some of these different facilities, folks are keeping that as close to their chest as possible. Might be good for business, obviously, not so great for local transparency and water use planning on the ground. And when we look across Illinois, over 80% of our state is in some level of drought currently. This is a major challenge, and our state water use laws are still based, believe it or not, this is real, off of British common law. It's honestly very much like a gentleman's agreement. You do not have to apply for a permit. There are very few, if any, requirements. It is kind of a free-for-all when it comes to water use and withdrawal in Illinois. If you're discharging into a major body of water, that's something very different. If you're taking water out of the Great Lakes, there are more protections there. But for everything else in Illinois on water withdrawal, we have very few, if any, protections in place. And this is a major, major challenge that we have to tackle at the state level. Energy affordability. How many folks have seen their electric bill go up in the last year, out of curiosity? Okay. Mine as well. Yeah. Huh? Have anyone seen their electricity bills go down? All right, we'll take that into the Q&A perhaps later. I bet there's an exciting clean energy story to be had there. But the vast majority, right, we are seeing utility bills skyrocket. It's not just in Illinois. Let's be clear. This is happening across the country. We are seeing unprecedented demand for power. This comes down to basic supply and demand. And one of the primary drivers of this are data centers. They are putting so much strain on our power grid and on wholesale energy markets that we are seeing utility bills and those prices rise. So the two big costs I want to focus on to make sure folks get the overall wholesale energy and capacity prices, wholesale power prices, basically. That demand, these guys are so significant, it's creating upward pressure on those wholesale energy markets. We are in the ComEd territory of Illinois, and our regional grid monitor said, after we saw a big price spike starting last year, they said very clearly, over 80% of that increase in costs from data centers. Simply put, not just ones that are online, but those that are waiting to come in to get online, because energy markets have to plan in advance to have enough power available to be provided in the future. So this is an extraordinary impact that we're seeing on folks' utility bills, obviously at a time where affordability, across the economy is a critical issue. The other major cost, grid upgrades. When a new energy customer comes onto an electric grid, there is grid infrastructure that needs to be built to provide power to that energy user. Distribution lines, substations, high voltage transmission lines to provide power. That's the energy infrastructure. These are costs that are also being socialized onto all of the other ratepayers. We're taking some steps to address that, but it is not adequate enough. And Union of Concerned Scientists did a good report recently taking a look at ComEd customers' bills in 2024 alone, showing that for data center transmission line costs, we paid over $200 million. This is the last thing we need at a time of critical affordability challenges. These guys have an unprecedented amount of wealth and financial backing. They can pay their fair share of costs and not socialize it on the rest of us. Climate in the power grid. I think two things I want to say here. First, all of the analysis that we've seen with even just minimal data center growth in Illinois shows we're going to likely meet that demand for power by running existing coal plants and gas plants harder than we are today. We've got a lot of challenges bringing on new clean energy projects as quickly as we want. They're coming online, but they're not quite at the speed that we need them to be coming online. We're working on that. This is going to be met with overwhelmingly more fossil fuel generation, which increases pollution, dangerous air pollution for local health, but also climate pollution. So in 2021, if climate change is an issue that you care about, in 2021, Illinois set responsible climate goals in state law. Without protections in place for data centers, those will go out the window. Not only will we not be able to start making some responsible reductions in climate pollution, but we're actually going to see climate pollution increase by over 50%. The other major piece of this, the strain on our power grid. And there's a relationship with what we were just talking about before and why prices are going up and that supply and demand. More and more strain is coming on our power grid. And we're seeing more and more extreme weather events as well. And so these are creating real challenges for our power grid, and coupled with extraordinary new volumes of demand, that's creating more and more challenges as well. And we're seeing also in a recent analysis here the computational power that's needed to run an AI model, that dramatic shift in power usage, we're just seeing more reliability challenges pop up, and this is a challenge. This is a real issue that we are tackling locally, but at a regional level as well. And I think this is one of my last one on the impacts before we start talking about some actions here. Local air pollution and noise. One of the remarkable elements of data center development is the extraordinary amount of backup, typically diesel generation, that these facilities bring with them on site in the event that the power grid goes out for a few hours, maybe a day, who knows? So many of their contracts and requirements for their clients say we have to be available 24/7, 24/7, 24/7. So they bring literally, the trend is about twice as much backup diesel generation as what their peak power needs are. So you can imagine for a 1.8 gigawatt data center, we're talking about over 3 gigs of backup diesel generation. That's like 3 pretty huge power plants, like huge power plants. They look like these large container metal boxes and whatnot. But these ultimately are filthy, and while they might not run all the time, when they do, they go full tilt. And believe it, they are very noisy. What we saw in the city of Aurora, believe it was last year, when a substation was blown on site at their local data center, their backup diesel generators ran for 72 hours straight. The reports coming in from the local residents around that facility said, you can see the headline right here, is like having a helicopter on our roof. It was like having a jet being operated in our backyard. Folks can't sleep, babies can't go to bed. It's a real quality of life issue. In addition to the spike in local air pollution that folks have to face. This is a major issue that we have to tackle and have protections around. And then what we continuously hear, the lack of transparency and community engagement. A lot of these developers are coming in quickly and having fast conversations with city council members or county board members. We're seeing some non-disclosure agreements get signed, deals being brokered, and there's just not enough meaningful conversation around both the positive offerings that these facilities may bring, as well as how to tackle some of these challenges. And so I think we're seeing more and more of a political clash instead of having rational, responsible conversations around how to navigate these really difficult decision points that local communities are being faced with. So we'll talk about some next steps here. And I will say the last thing. Incredible amounts of investment, financial investments are coming in here. We got a bubble. The bubble might pop. There are some we might see facilities get built, and ultimately they might go belly up within a couple of years. And so what are the protections that need to be in place to make sure that communities aren't left and ratepayers aren't left with stranded costs? What happens at the end of a facility's life? How does that facility get decommissioned? Who pays those costs? What are those responsibilities? These are really important questions that do need to be carefully considered because of the unique financial nature of this emerging industry. Because it looks like good and fast money right now, but it might not be there in the next few years. So here's what I think is important. It's going to be challenging to get major things done at the federal level right now on this issue. I didn't want, for those of you on the Zoom, this created some laughs in the room. Didn't want to judge, but so it is absolutely critical that states and local municipalities and counties use their power to put responsible protections in place. Can't say that more clearly. So on the local side of things, the transparent and meaningful public engagement process is really, really essential. I can't say that enough. And to rationally assess the costs and the benefits in a rational manner. We're not seeing that happen enough. And I think there are going to be some communities that do see this as a good opportunity. City of Joliet voted last week 8-1 against their population. What was disappointing was there was never a rational conversation around, okay, we're loud and clear. We hear you, union workers. This is an exciting job opportunity. We hear that. Tons of community concerns that were pushed aside. We're not listened to, we're not addressed. And it doesn't, in a city like Joliet, it doesn't necessarily have to be an either or. And I think it's important for folks to, for those conversations to be explored and for protections to be put in place in the instance that local communities do ultimately see this being a positive investment to come to their community. Many communities are going to say, no, not for us, not where we are. And that's going to be important as well. So a couple of recommendations here, and would encourage folks to talk after the meeting. We might bring her up for Q&A. Lori McKiernan, resident in Springfield, Illinois, who's just been doing incredible work connecting with communities across Illinois who are facing these data center proposals, how to navigate your local zoning processes, you know, and all of those challenges that come with making sure your local voice can be heard by your local municipality or county. But a couple of recommendations: begin the process early, from go, as soon as the developer express interests, and do not sign non-disclosure agreements. It's not needed. It's not needed. We need to have transparent conversations with the public about the nature of these proposals. And if a developer is insisting on that, it's not going to be a good fit for the local community. Simple as that. Require a developer to disclose critical baseline data, projected water and energy use. What is the nature of their energy contract agreement? What are they planning to bring? We've heard a lot of different companies say, well, we have this contract with this alternative retail electric supplier. We've got all of our power needs accounted for. Well, actually, they're just going to buy power off the market, and they're not helping to bring new supply and resources that are additive to the grid, that are needed to make sure that we are maintaining that supply and demand. How many backup generators are they bringing with them? What is the pollution that they expect? How were they going to attempt to have those generators permitted under US EPA Clean Air Act standards? There's a whole host of different questions, and we can talk more about that, but all of those things need to be disclosed up front. And too often we're seeing these projects move forward with major question marks, major questions unanswered on a number of these projects. And convening multiple public hearings with advance notice, at times accessible to working families, and providing translation services. You know, in the instance of Joliet, I think a number of these critical process pieces didn't happen. They didn't begin the process early with engaging the public. FOIA requests showed that those conversations went back about 2 years. Community's only been engaged in the last couple months. Major data points were not disclosed. We have no number of what number of backup generators are going to be brought into City of Joliet, which is a non-attainment area. Its air is unhealthy under Clean Air Act standards. And community members were shut out. This is folks, there were overflow room. There's not enough space for them to participate in some of the public meetings. And for over 30% of the local population, Latino Spanish-speaking residents, no translation equipment provided, no translation of materials about the project. These are fundamental justice issues that really need to be addressed. And local municipalities and counties have the ability to address these issues and hold developers and their own public processes and zoning and permitting processes to higher standards.
Standards just been lowered?
Yes. US EPA standards have been lowered. All the more reason why local protections and state protections are so critical. Absolutely.
Discussing some of the things that could maybe possibly be done.
Yep. We're going to pause 100%.
Write them down. We're going to do a Q&A at the
Q&A is coming. Q&A is coming. I'll walk through these protections briefly and the state ones, and then hand it over to Anne, and we'll dig into questions. And keep in mind, this is the first of what ultimately is going to need to be a series of conversations, of planning sessions, of skill set building to make sure that Rockford is well prepared to tackle these challenges. So this is the first of hopefully many. And so appreciate everyone working through these things. So look, there's a lot of local control, local power that communities can and should use. Oftentimes you might hear differences of opinion. My experience has been kind of blows where the politics blow. If you can build the right political power, you're going to have perhaps more generous legal interpretation of the power. But this exists. We're seeing communities exercise this power, and we encourage communities to do so. Through zoning revisions, through enforceable community benefits agreements, communities can demand certain requirements of data center facilities and developers. On water use requirements, on energy requirements, you can and should demand that that facility bring new clean energy resources with them. It doesn't just have to be an on-site utility scale project or in the neighboring town. You can think creatively about how to bring new generation sources with them that help reduce people's electricity bills, installation of residential solar, pairing with storage. Imagine for your rising utility bills, which you've already been helping these guys pay for, can they help you lower those bills to reduce peak demand on the power grid? That's part of bringing their own clean energy supply. So there's creative things that folks can and should be thinking about, and local communities should be demanding of these developers. Transparency and reporting, all the things, the water, critical, air emissions, requiring on-site air monitoring, and reporting regularly on that data. Setbacks, noise restrictions, local hiring through project labor agreements, and local moratoriums. It is not uncommon for folks to be perhaps a little overwhelmed with all the different regulatory options that a local community can take. That's okay. I think what the city of Aurora did is a nice example. They said, we're going to put a temporary moratorium in place, and we're going to seriously take a look, do a deep dive on a number of these issues. And they came back after engaging the public in a robust public process on different local protections. And last night they passed an ordinance with a whole suite of different requirements on data centers, on water use, energy, backup generators. That's a good example. So even if you don't have all the information right now, that's okay. You can still hit pause and have a good conversation and think about, okay, what protections do we want to put in place that are no regrets? Whether we okay a project or not, these would be good things to have in place. And then at the state level, simply put, so many of these key decisions, we need to make sure that there are protections in place for all communities. And so myself, Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, all of our partners are working very hard to pass the Power Act. Hoping to move this in the spring legislative session that concludes at the end of May. If not May, then we're going to push for it in the fall veto session in October. But there are three major pillars that address these critical issues and ultimately come down to making sure that data centers pay for 100% of their costs. Power, grid costs, they cannot pass on any cost to consumers. They have to bring their own clean energy needs. Two, for community protections, we need to make sure that there's proactive community engagement, that data centers are supporting them financially, investing in community benefits agreements, investing in affordability funds for the entire state, and that local air quality is protected from backup diesel generation. And on the water side, we need to make sure that there are transparent reporting requirements, sustainable water use requirements as well. And we need to actually get our act together as a state in requiring more appropriate water withdrawal and use permits that data centers ultimately will have to get. So these are, right now, this is the most ambitious data center legislation in the country. I think it is I think we are confident that this is an important issue that legislators care about. But I do think this is going to be a really difficult process to get this thing across the finish line, given a lot of different powerful interests at play. And so it is critically important to contact your lawmakers about this, to take action on data centers, and to make sure to pass the Power Act. You have a number of very important lawmakers on this issue in your territory. And encourage you guys to reach out, set up meetings, log phone calls. For those of you that don't know how to use a QR code, and that's okay. Hold. You're gonna click on your camera. Okay. And you're going to hold your camera up to the QR code, and you should see a yellow link that pops up. All you got to do is click on that link. You don't even need to take the picture. Just hold it up, click on the link. Okay. I don't know if anyone's walked through that with you, but yeah. I needed someone to walk through that with me at one point in time. Way to help each other out. Way to help each other out. And we want to see you guys in Springfield. We've been a part of passing transformative energy legislation over the last few years. We can do really ambitious stuff, but it takes a lot of people, hundreds, thousands of people speaking up in local districts and actually showing up in Springfield to demand action and say, we hold the power on this day. This is actually our house. And so we encourage you guys to join us, jump on a bus on May 30th. It is a data center lobby day for the whole state of Illinois to demand protections and the passage of the Power Act right before they wrap for the spring session. So it is a great time, and I hope you guys will join us. We maybe need to move this is beyond my pay grade. For folks on the Zoom, thanks for bearing with us. We were dealing with some technical issues, but those of you on the Zoom, and folks, we have 74 participants on the Zoom, by the way, which is awesome. You guys are getting a big round of applause in the room. Thank you guys for being with us. I will pause here, but long story short, I mean, I come bearing some unfortunate news, many of which you guys have already saw a lot of heads nodding. A lot of folks know about these challenges. The good news is we can take action. We can take action at the local level. We can take action at the state level. We have the power to act, but it's going to take organizing and showing back up when Anne and others follow up with you guys after this event and say, hey, will you do this next thing? Will you come to this next meeting? Do it and keep doing it. And we're seeing that the more folks that keep showing up and keep doing the thing, we're winning. We're winning, and Rockford can win too.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. All right, so this kind of next section is locally what we know, what we don't know, what questions are still outstanding. And I guess one of the unfortunate parts about it, because there's been there hasn't been a lot of information shared. There are a lot more questions than answers. But I want to share with you what we do know at the local level. One of the biggest questions that's come up multiple times is what the approval process looks like. So I actually talked to Todd Cagnoni, who's the city manager, and so he gave that information to me. And then many of you probably saw on Facebook that the city actually posted the exact same information yesterday. So I'm not sure why they didn't share that information earlier, but I digress. So there are multiple sort of checkpoints for this process. So I know that there have been concerns about with current zoning that this data center will just be able to go in without any input. And that's not true. We have multiple opportunities for checking in on this process with city council. So any development of the property will require a subdivision plat, which has to go through the Code and Regulation Committee before it goes to city council. And should there be any variations from zoning ordinance, which for a development like this, there would absolutely need to be a variance. It would have to go through Zoning Board of Appeals, the Code and Regulation Committee, and then again to City Council. The property itself is zoned I2, so general industrial, and it actually has been zoned that way since 2008. So this is not a new zoning that's just recently happened. It's been that way for a long time. And should there be a development agreement, there would be an opportunity to address mitigating factors there. That would go through planning and development and again to city council. So you can see there are multiple opportunities for us to engage with city council and for this project to have to clear all of these hurdles before final approval. The location, so many people again have probably seen the 1,100 acres thrown around. From what I can find and what I've been able to get from public information, this area here is 434 acres of the 1,100 acres. I have a pending request with the city to get information on where the other 665 acres are. Interestingly enough, part of the area that was actually annexed by the city is actually in Ogle County. So go figure, part of Rockford is in Ogle County. Didn't know that until about a week ago. But importantly, you can see on the north side of that property is Killbuck Bluffs Forest Preserve and the south branch of the Kishwaukee River. For those that were at City Council on Monday or are familiar with what happened at City Council on Monday, they proposed and adopted the 2040 land use plan. That is something that the city does every, 10 to 15 years or so. This was open for public comment for the last probably 2 months. And it was shared on social media. It's on their website. So they it's been out there, but again, it's one of those things that if you don't know what you're looking for, it can be hard to weigh in on it. But that map didn't change the zoning, right? And that's what I think a lot of people were concerned about is like, oh, by approving this map, we're approving the data center. That's not true. The data center, that zoning was there well before this 2040 map existed. So the map is a policy guide for the city. It's a vision for how land use may evolve over time, a tool to inform zoning, and that infrastructure investment and development. And it's a framework for community discussion, and coordinated decision making. It's, again, not a zoning change. It's not an authorization for any development. It doesn't alter any existing land use. It doesn't reduce any established property rights. And there's no mandate for property owners to have to redevelop based on this land use plan. So just so that you're clear on what that land use plan is and is not. So current considerations with the city. I've been talking a lot to Tom McNamara in the last week. He gets phone calls from me pretty much every other day with, okay, there's another question that came up, or hey, I need this clarification. Same thing with Todd, the city manager. They've both been really helpful in answering questions. So I appreciate their response to the questions and concerns that are coming up. One thing that has come up is the TIF district, which is a tax increment financing district, which basically abates property taxes incrementally over a period of time. The current TIF district for this area expires in December of 2035. The city last fall put a resolution to the Joint Review Board to terminate the current TIF district and propose a new and expanded TIF district. That hasn't been approved yet. There hasn't been, as far as I understand it, there hasn't been any movement on that, but there could be a change in that TIF district. The other thing, and actually Christine mentioned this, is that community benefit agreement. So they are committed to having a host site agreement that has a community benefit portion to it should the development make it that far. So now the laundry list of questions. So obviously one of the biggest driving factors is who is the end user. That will drive so much of the decision-making process. What size will the data center be on 1,100 acres? So is it going to be on that northernmost part, right next to the forest preserve and closest to where most people are living, because there are residents that are around there? Or is it going to be farther south where it's farther away from homes, farther away from the river, farther away from the forest preserve? We don't know that yet. It is not likely that a data center is going to be the full 1,100 acres. So where does it fit on the land that Monarch owns? We don't know that yet. What kind of cooling system is planned? Is it air-cooled, water-cooled? The video that Monarch has presented has been interestingly very transparent about it being water-cooled and probably being an open system, which I have serious concerns about. But the city has the ability to negotiate that with them of, hey, that's not an acceptable operation for us. Yeah, so there are data centers that are actually using treated water in a closed loop system. So they're not pulling from groundwater, they're not pulling from drinking water. So there are ways to do it. So again, there's an opportunity there. We want to make sure that we're doing it. If this passes, how can we limit the impact? So again, what's the water source? Is it groundwater? Are they pulling from the Kishwaukee? Is it municipal water? What chemicals will be added to the water for treatment? Where, if it's an open loop system, where will it be discharged and what temperature? Because if we're releasing heated water and it's near the Kishwaukee River, that's a problem. That's a significant problem. Especially with if there's any chemical treatment to it, obviously there would be limitations from the state. So the EPA and IDNR won't allow that to happen. The next thing is what's the energy source? So obviously Byron makes sense just from proximity, right? Is there a power agreement with ComEd already? There is a member of city council that made a statement to such that there may actually already be a power agreement that's been set up. I haven't heard that from anybody else, but the fact that a city council person said that in a public setting leads me to believe that it's likely. Gina Meeks. What city council member? Was the one that said that there may be a power agreement already. And I feel comfortable sharing her name because she said it in a room full of 50 people. So again, the next sort of step of questions to be answered is economic. So how many jobs will be created? How many of them are temporary? How many of them are permanent? What are the concrete long-term benefits to the community? Again, we're talking about, okay, there's potentially an AI bubble if we're expanding, if we're building all of these data centers and then AI or the need for data centers somehow implodes, are we then stuck with a shell of a building? How do we prevent that?
And then they have to bring in a little nuclear power plant, like one out of a submarine, and put inside a building. What about that?
Write that on your questions. Again, yes, Q&A session. But also, if there are questions that come up, you can write them on those cards or submit them through that QR code as well. How does this investment compare to the public costs and risks? And how much revenue will be generated and over what time period and where is that revenue going? Right? We need to know that. Like which different taxing bodies are going to be getting revenue from this this property, this development. Impact on residents and businesses. How will the city ensure sufficient water and energy for current residents and businesses? We need to make sure that they are considering that as they're considering this decision. And how will the city and county protect ratepayers from increased costs? Again, Christina addressed a lot of that. And if the increased demand causes infrastructure issues, whether that's water or electricity infrastructure, who's responsible for it with that increased demand? Again, questions we should have answered before this project is allowed to move forward. Safety. And this one I can take zero credit for. Actually, Jesse sent a resource that had this included, and I hadn't thought about this. Will the local fire department have the equipment and training to respond to an emergency at the data center? Who's responsible for funding that equipment and training? What kind of suppression system is required and what are their potential environmental impacts? When we had the explosion up in Rockton a few years ago, all the PFAS that leaked into the river, that's a concern, right? We need to make sure if they have a fire suppression system that includes PFAS chemicals, what do they have outside the facility that protects those chemicals from going into the Kishwaukee, going into the forest preserve, going into neighbors' home, like into residents and farmland that are around all those properties. And then, of course, environmental proximity to the Kishwaukee River, Killbuck Bluffs, we've talked about that a little bit. It's really close. And one of the things that I'm nervous about with Killbuck Bluffs, we've had community scientists that have been out collecting data at that forest preserve for a number of years, and we know there are certain species of frogs and bats that can be found on those properties, and if there's noise levels being if there's certain decibel of noise coming from this data center, it's going to impact those populations. Again, we've talked a little bit about this kind of sort of the water quantity and water quality issues. So chemicals, heat, and where that water's coming from, noise pollution, just mentioned that. And then Christina mentioned the data center itself. Obviously, you're paving over permeable surface, right? You're paving over land. So how is the stormwater going to be managed out there? Again, another water issue. So laundry list of questions, things we don't know. Here is an opportunity to stay involved. This is the QR code that you got, that was the sign-in opportunity to fill out and ask questions or provide comments. Let us know if you want to receive information about future events, about any updates that we get and understand about the data center proposal. And if you're willing to provide public comment when the opportunity arises. And for those that don't want to use QR codes and Google Forms and your phone, that's what those handwritten half sheets are for. So we can take it that way too. And feel free to use the backside. So if you're looking at the front going, that's not enough space, flip it over and write some more. All right. I'm ready for the firing squad, I think. And I will be as honest as I can about the information that I know, and I'm not afraid to say I don't know. And we will be documenting the list of questions that people ask. So again, if you haven't written it down, we'll also be writing the questions that get asked verbally. For those that are on Zoom, if you want to drop things in chat, we'll answer questions that way as well. Julie and Jesse both have microphones, then they will be walking around. So if you want to raise your hand, and we'll start the firing squad. Yeah. Because the papers got handed out as people were coming in.
I don't know if you can hear, I don't like microphones. You kind of described something that sounds like the Wild Wild West. And I'm wondering, as data centers, computational increases, and maybe data centers will become obsolete, and they abandon them, what's the cleanup process? Like a super fund? That kind of thing? Because there's studies or research about doing this type of computational power out in space. You know, let's all put our tin hats on. Sounds stupid, but
it's a lot cooler. It's a lot cooler up there.
No, yeah. And
I'm serious. It sounds crazy, but no, he's not wrong. Like they're talking about.
And they're gonna have solar power from space instead of on your roof. It's coming. You know, and a lot of us here ain't gonna see a lot of that, but you know, what are they doing to make other people, you know, make the rest of the world go with this? One thing I thought everybody would love to know. I read today that everybody who pays electricity, 13% of your bill goes to profit nationwide. 13%. You know, how much do they get in 2024? $224 billion. 13% nationwide. You want to stop that? Community solar. And tell Trump what he can do with it.
Oh, yep.
So quick, one thing we didn't quite talk about, we talked a little bit about noise, but one of the important things is, we have pretty much two options. Either our electricity bill is gonna go up because of plugged into our grid, or they're going to make their own grid. And Ben Jordan made an excellent 30-minute YouTube video about this. Basically, when data centers use their own power source, they have turbines that run all the time. You can't hear it, but you can feel it. Imagine 3 decibel, low rumble, all the time, month after month after month. So those are your two choices. I got one question answered. Monarch owns the land. What the map was and wasn't. The map proposed Monday or approved Monday wasn't a mandate on anything. Could the city mandate that Monarch use that land as a solar farm so that we get $10 ComEd bills? Is that a possibility, or does Monarch pretty much have free reign to do it?
Because it's zoned industrial, I don't know what the allowance is for doing solar on areas that are zoned industrial, but it's a good question and definitely one to document and ask later. I've learned, and I've talked to a couple of people, I've learned more about zoning in the last 10 days than I have the rest of my entire life. So that's a good question to ask because it's an opportunity.
Thank you. My question is on community input. Have any of the locations where existing data centers are ever had a referendum where the community was allowed to vote on whether or not they wanted it, or was it just by the local government?
So I've seen instances where entire city or village councils have actually been recalled because of their vote on a data center. I am not aware, and maybe you've got information on this in terms of a data center decision going to the voters. Oh.
Literally on the open roads in CDC, and they were doing a story about our legislators, Congress, trying to develop some legislation to put some guardrails into place on AI and the data centers in particular. But the comment they made was that Meta, Google, all these billionaire AI creators are so many light years ahead of us on information about it that the legislators wouldn't even know what kind of decent restrictions to put in place because nobody, especially our legislators are our age and older, most of them, but that they just don't even know what to put in place to protect the environment.
Correct. Correct. And oh, go ahead, Jody.
The question is, does ComEd get
Does what get involved?
Citizens Utility Board.
That's, I don't know, maybe a Brad question. Okay. There you go. So Citizens Utility Board is involved in that discussion. One thing I will say about legislation, data centers and AI are one of the fastest growing areas of legislation nationwide. Again, in researching all of this, the first 6 weeks of 2026, so of this year, there were more than 300 pieces of legislation proposed across 30 states around AI and mostly data center use. So it is a hot topic. Into all the conversations I had with the mayor, there are a lot of conversations happening at mayor level as well across the country, cities of all sizes that are grappling with this issue. We are not unique, and it's okay. We understand that there is a need for some data storage, but do we need 200 more data centers in Illinois? Probably not. I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not. And we also want to make sure that we're doing it correctly in the places that it makes sense at the pace that makes sense. I'm not sure how many folks are familiar with the DeKalb data center that recently got approved. And the speed at which that is going in, ComEd will not be able to provide power to that site for, I think it's like 3 or 4 years. So what they are doing instead is powering it with natural gas generators until ComEd can run power to that site. So that's a problem. That's a concern, right? And so it's making sure that we have legislators that are informed, which is a challenge, right? Because they have so many other issues. And actually, I'm going to out one of my staff who's here. We were having this conversation earlier this week about the analogy of what's happening right now versus what was happening in the 90s around the internet. How many people for those of us in the room remember how freaked out people got when the internet exploded and all the things that were going to happen because of the internet? How far behind were our legislators in regulating the internet? I mean, we're 2026 and I would argue we're still behind on regulating the internet. And so and data centers are the same issue, but it's happening at a much faster speed. And so that's the challenge. That's the challenge that we're up against.
So, feed the centers in Winnetka. There's nothing proposed in Philip. There are no data centers in Winnetka. Nothing is proposed in Kenilworth. Nothing in Lake Geneva. We're a working class and middle class community. Is there any kind of discrimination? Yeah, based on our population, for these sites, like, to California, it's more open, more farmland. Joliet's is very blue collar. Is there some kind of discrimination as defined on that ground?
I will be honest, I don't know. I don't know, Christina, if you have any answer to that. I know a lot of it is also going to be on the cost of land, right? The cost of land here is a heck of a lot cheaper than it is in Lake Geneva. So that's going to be one of the driving factors.
I just have a real quick question, mostly food for thought. The way this is being talked about, it's like they're talking about it as if it's inevitable, right? It's like, oh, if the data center isn't here, it's going to be somewhere else, and then you're losing out on that money, or it's going to go to some other state. We're not going to be competitive, yada yada yada. But we just saw that Sora, the OpenAI video model just got canned. Disney just canceled their AI deal. Like, I'm curious, show of hands, if people feel comfortable saying, does anybody or how many people here use AI regularly?
I think all of us do, whether intentionally or not.
Thing for work fine before they decided to change things here, but like it's sold as if it's the march of progress, and I just don't really see it that way. It's already just it hasn't improved my life any noticeably. That's all I have.
Yep. No, I can appreciate the bubble there. Gotcha.
So, but we know that leaders care about money. So what financial data can you tell us about other local projects that we can arm ourselves with as we go to these community meetings, as we talk to our legislators to make sure that it's there's a major financial impact here? Thank you.
Yeah, so there's obviously all of the balance of the different like incentive issues, but also a term some folks may be familiar with, but not everybody, is ecosystem services. So there is a dollar amount that you can put on land, water, wood, different habitats, and the services that they provide for humanity, whether that's flood protection, climate mitigation. Trying to think of any other categories off the top of my head. But I can share that information more broadly when I can think through the full list. But the dollar amount of ecosystem services, the Nature Conservancy actually has a really good ecosystem services calculator on their website to help sort of calculate those values. So that's one place to start. I'm trying to think of others off the top of my head. But and you're right, that's one of the biggest things is making sure that when we are talking with city council, we're talking with legislators, as passionate and as emotional as people are about this, and I get it, it's also being rational and using data, using high quality sources, because we all know that there's lots of misinformation. And so using trusted sources for informing our legislators. And I know there's city council and our mayor have all said, like, if you see examples of communities that have done this right, or systems that people or that other data centers are using, like, send that information to me. He's like, I'm trying to learn as much about all of this as everybody else is as fast as I can. So he's in regular communication with the mayor of Aurora, because he obviously saw what was happening there, and appreciated that process. And so trying to figure out what that looks like for Rockford.
I'll start with what I think is probably my most important question that I've come up with so far, and that is, how do we ensure council meetings aren't closed? Because one of the biggest problems with Joliet is their entire thing was done behind closed doors. Public was not allowed to comment ever. So how do we ensure that our officials are allowing us to comment in the first place?
Get really familiar with the Open Meetings Act. That's the best place to start, and knowing what the parameters are for city council to have closed session, because when they have closed session, they have to provide a reason for why they are going into closed session. And they have a very limited scope of things that are covered under that. So get familiar with Open Meetings Act. And if you have questions or concerns about what's happening in closed session, or why things aren't happening out in the public, you can reach out to the mayor, to city council, even to the city attorney, for that information.
I think we all want to hit the ground running, and we have information available. I was wondering, with all the proposed data, sites, and centers, has there been a case where city council has, a city council member has proposed that they do not sign an NDA?
I think my understanding is Beloit has proposed that at the moment. I'm not sure where it is in that process, but I believe there's a city council person in Beloit that has proposed that.
Okay. Would that be the first step that we take so that there's transparency and so that we have all the information available?
I mean, I think it's it's one of many first steps.
I just want to point something out about the House Senate bills. What they call the Power Act, which is actually, the title is the Hyperscale Data Center Bill. It has a lot of good protections in it, I'll say. But it varies depending how big the center is. Now, hyperscale data center is something that peaks at 50 megawatts. That's a lot of power. That power over an entire month is equivalent to about 57,600 average homes in Rockford. We're talking a lot of power. It has requirements for data centers, all data centers. Provide things like impact assessments, funds for public benefits. Impact statements, use of renewable energies and so forth. And it also says that there's reporting requirements for energy and water usage. However, it states in the bill that for hyperscale data centers, it can be submitted on a confidential basis to the Illinois Commerce Commission and will not be subject to the Freedom of Information. That is in the bill. Okay. Now, the ICC will provide an aggregate and anonymized form of data via a website. That means if this data center is a hyperscale data center, we won't know the impact on our community because the ICC will not be obligated to give us that information. So I really recommend that everybody take a good look at the bill because I said there's a lot of good things in the bill. But this reporting requirement is, in my opinion, a deal breaker.
It has not been approved yet. Yeah, the Power Act has not been approved. But yes. Mm-hmm.
I have a question about something that hasn't been addressed, and that's the public health implications. I read a lot of articles about how these data centers can increase rates of respiratory illnesses, cancer rates, and cardiovascular diseases in communities where they are. Is there anybody that has any information that can share tonight about that or that can speak to that?
I mean, Christina talked about the obviously diesel generators, right? Being close to diesel or even natural gas generators, it's going to improve impact air quality, which obviously leads to the respiratory issues. I don't have any facts right now off the top of my head that I can give you, but again, that's add that list to the list of questions that still need to be answered. Because that's a lot of what this is about too, is okay, here's what we know, here's what concerns we still have. So, yeah. One question I'm going to answer from the Zoom. Is there any discussion ongoing? That's part of the legislation. Oh, it looks like Hannah answered it. Never mind. Thanks, Hannah. Hannah is our Illinois Environmental Council person. She actually is at home with a migraine, so she's navigating all of this at home for us.
Okay, so myself and all of my neighbors live a mile or less from this proposed data site. And we're all pretty upset and traumatized by the information. Now, this section that we live in is county, Winnebago County, and when Rockford annexed that area for the data center, they did not combine the whole thing, right? So a lot of us have well water. A lot of us are pulling from that aquifer that I'm assuming that they're going to be tapping into for the data center. I've seen some information about how houses on well have run dry from their water, that they have extreme noise, that their lawns and their houses are covered in dust, that their creeks dry up, that a lot of these natural water resources have made their property value basically no one will buy their property, and it's not safe for them to live there anymore. And my question is there any way that if they choose to go forward, we can put in protections that we are compensated for our loss of our lives and our property and our livelihood being sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, I think that could certainly be part of a community benefits agreement that the city would negotiate. One thing for those of you that are immediate neighbors, you will likely find out about the next stage of this process before everybody else, because when it goes in front of zoning, they are required to notify you of that. So if you
Radius.
Yep. If you are a neighbor, you'll get a postcard, likely a postcard in the mail or a letter in the mail that will say, "Hey, this proposed zoning thing is happening. Here's the meeting. for you to attend. Again, those that live right near the project, you will likely find out before the rest of us do.
I'll get your number. Is there any precedent for these companies buying out properties around them whose lives they have destroyed, like compensating them for?
Not that I am aware of, but again, that's something that we can definitely add to the list of questions and things to follow up on.
Thank you.
I have a lot of questions.
You're in good company.
I understand that there. I don't believe that a lot of people talk about, I know there's a lot of concern about AI data centers coming online because obviously there's huge issue with cooling and power. But we also have to remember that there have been traditional data centers all over the country for years. So the first question will be, is there a legislation where they're looking into you cannot? From my understanding is that currently there is no restriction on converting to traditional data center, bringing the AI systems. So I know we're talking about a lot about hyperscale data centers, but there is no concern. We talk about, okay, should we look into the traditional data centers becoming a hyperscale AI data center? Where obviously no power requirement and cooling requirement. And so is there talk about that?
Not that I'm aware of, because the traditional data centers are physically a lot smaller. And so you're not necessarily going to be able to turn a physical space into a hyper data center.
All these data centers are built within that campus. So obviously they will require additional power coming in, but there is no and for example, an IBM, which had data centers all over the world, they have obviously implemented AI, and I don't believe that they are expanding major data centers and converting the traditional data center into AI. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good infrastructure question that I don't know the answer to, but would be good to know if that development is happening or not.
How much obviously every state, everyone uses computer. But I have not seen any study as to how much computing power we are actually currently using overall. How much growth we are expecting for the next 5-10 years. At some point, we as much needed have to accommodate the computing power somewhere.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, how, again, we talked about, it was like, okay, as there are needs for data centers, right? Do we need 200 of them in Illinois? Probably not. And okay, yes, we need to expand that capacity, but how do we do it responsibly? And is it right for our community? Is it right for that location? Those are all questions that we need to navigate, and obviously to be the strongest advocates that we can, we need to continue to read and learn from other communities that have gone through this process, lessons learned. So questions they wish they would have asked, things they wish they would have required of a data center before it came in. I think because it's happened so many times, you're getting more sort of best practices in how to work with data center companies and what to require of them, and how to decide whether or not it's right for your community or not.
Just to answer you.
On behalf of the host, we just want to thank all of you for coming tonight. We're still taking questions, but there's more hands than we can get to. So we really appreciate your patience. And I also just want to invite everyone to take a deep breath and exhale and take a moment to look around at all of the people who are here because you care about Rockford and you care about the future of Rockford, and you are not alone in that. Thank you for
Monarch Energy also involved in the health situation?
They are not.
Yeah, so it's.
Yes.
We have multiple enemies.
Yes, there are multiple companies. I mean, again, as many folks may be aware, there was a proposed data center in Cherry Valley that has kind of been put on hiatus at this point, for reasons that I'm not aware of. But Microsoft owns the land, so. I believe it was a combination of different agencies. So I think it was part Illinois Environmental Council, part Sierra Club, I think part Prairie Rivers Network. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could, they have contact information on their website, and any of their websites. Yeah.
Yeah, you brought up the fact that at council meetings, closed session and things, and I was just wondering, well, actually, I just wanted to comment about the fact that every time I've been there, there's been a closed session, it always is at the end of the night. After everybody's adjourned, everybody gets up and leaves, they said, oh yeah, we have to, and it's kind of thrown there at the end, and I know that there was a lot of people in the last council meeting, but there was like 3 people in the audience left, and they went in closed session, and you had said that they need to have a reason, and usually they'll say what it's about, but I have yet to hear them say what the reason for going behind this closed door is. So is there a way to like question that and say, why are you going behind closed doors? And for one of them, they did have listed that they would be going behind closed doors, but I do not remember the land acquisition. I don't remember that being on there, maybe I'm wrong. But I'm just like, why, what kind of land acquisition? We don't get the video until Thursday afternoon. So how do we find out those sort of things? On the website, I don't see the minutes. So just, yeah, so how do we get them to disclose the closed meetings are about?
So closed session is an interesting one to navigate. We have more than a few elected officials in the room that know about closed session and approving of releasing of closed session. There is a process that they have to go through to do that. And I don't know all of the details of how that works, but there is a process for releasing closed session minutes, and in the case of city council, potentially closed session recordings or not. Yeah, Brian, since you're in front, I can take you.
The expected time frame that the city would get the tax revenue.
So yeah, so that is one of the biggest questions, is the time frame about any of this. And in talking with Tom, Monarch Energy is saying we're days or weeks away from announcing who the end user will be, and he's like, I've been getting that response for months. So I don't know.
Many years we expect to get tax revenue from this data center. What's the number of years that they're working? Because the data center has a lifetime of 15 to maybe 30 years, but they have to completely retool the inside of every 3 to 5 years because those chips become obsolete. Meta even says that 9% of the chips fail per year. So, and the chips are thousands of dollars.
Yeah. So yeah, for those on Zoom,
it's very easy to see that if the bubble does burst and this thing is built, in 5 years we could have just an empty building.
yeah, and I think that needs to be part of a host site agreement to do that.
If it's a TIF district, they don't get any additional tax revenues.
That's right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so yeah, TIF districts, so that's the tax increment financing. So we're missing on those. So the other piece of it, that's where the host site and community benefit agreements come in, and where there is potential for offset of a TIF district and requiring that development to contribute so much money or so many other things as part of a host site or community benefit agreement, so that we can get revenue beyond what we would be missing out on in a TIF district.
It won't be Microsoft or Google or Facebook that owns this data set. It'll be some company that is selling to Facebook or whatever. And if they go out of business, they're bankrupt and we've got to white out.
Correct. And that's another question to be answered, because I don't know. I mean, somebody had asked me about, okay, if the data center goes belly up, but it's still owned, like the property is still owned by whatever company, whether it's Monarch or somebody else, it's still part of the TIF district. So are they not paying property taxes on a building that's not functioning, like that's not operating? Again, I don't know. That's again, another question to be answered and a concern.
Find a job, so why would they get
Correct.
property tax benefit?
Exactly. And again, I don't know the answer to that, but it's a question that somebody else asked me and I don't know the answer to it. And I have that same question and concern.
And I don't know if they've ever done a scale data center.
Nothing
So,
to inflation.
how do we trust that anything they don't have a record?
Correct. Julie, I'll take.
I grew up in the 6th Ward, in the EPA exurb, which goes from 20th Street to 2 blocks east of Kishwaukee from Harrison Avenue to Sandy College. Okay. I was in the Jefferson class of 74. We lost several people during those years, who grew up during those years, to liver and kidney cancer. We all had private wells, which were capped in 1980 because of the pollution. It's all about water. We have potable layer water in our aquifer at 200 feet. We have a non-potable aquifer layer at 900 feet. I learned this while residing the hog slaughter plant on Montague Road and the ethanol plant on Cunningham Road. It's all about water. It's our water. But if they can't find a closed loop and not taint all of our wells, this can't happen. I have bought this. I'm 69 years old. Everyone in their 50s and 60s who grew up going to Rock River and Riverdale and Nashville, they're all dying. So I'm going to tell you right now, it's all about the water leak.
Absolutely. And one thing I would encourage everybody while you're reaching out to your elected officials, I would encourage you to, especially at the county level, actually particularly at the county level, is to encourage county board members to fund doing 3D groundwater modeling. Yeah, so Boone County did it. Their county board approved it, a year and a half ago. They did the modeling field work last spring, and they're going to have a 3D model of exactly where their deep and shallow water aquifers meet so that they can act to protect their groundwater. The only other county in Illinois that has done it is Champaign County. We have 105 counties in Illinois. We had 102. Okay. Sorry, California transplant. Maybe I shouldn't out myself. But you have 100, so we have 102 counties, only 2 of which have actually done 3D groundwater modeling. So whether you live in Winnebago County or Ogle County, encourage your county board to do that, because then they can make data-informed decisions about your water resources. It's 3D groundwater modeling, and it's University of Illinois is doing the work. If anybody wants to talk offline, I will nerd out on that all day. It's such a cool process. So sorry, data junkie. Love data. Yeah.
Of whether or not our council people have already signed an NDA or any of our local leadership. And if we don't know that, how would we go about finding that out if they've already signed an NDA?
So my understanding, and Mayor McNamara has I think told a few of us in this room, he has not signed an NDA. City Council has literally had no knowledge of the project, the change in use until the rest of us did. Like when we saw it in the news was when City Council found out about it. The county board chair or county commissioner, not county commissioner, county chairperson, Joe Chiarelli and Karen Aaliyah, who's kind of his second, they have signed NDAs.
Joe did sign.
Joe did sign.
Hi, I just want to really return to the Power Act. I know somebody brought up a concern with it. I was just wondering, so the Power Act is not like set in stone yet, correct?
Correct.
So if we were wanting to get that part of change, would we reach out to our state senators and our state representatives and say, like, we make an amendment or something like that?
That's a good place to start. I would also look at all of the organizations that are pushing for approval, to check in with them because they know who the state legislators are that are most likely to be supportive of having an amendment. We have a couple of local state legislators that are generally like pretty environmentally friendly. I would say Dave Vella leading the pack frequently. Maurice West is among that group as well. But they can tell you because they have very good records on who holds what position on a specific issue. So definitely reach out to Illinois Environmental Council. It would be the place I would start just because I've seen their massive spreadsheets on who does what. So absolutely.
Name the bill, it'll show you there's like 10 co-sponsors, it'll tell you which of the.
Yeah, so yeah, if you go onto there's a couple of different legislative resources. You can see the pending bills. You can see who the sort of champions of the bill are, and then any co-signers. But there are frequently folks that are highly supportive that don't end up as co-signers as well. So that's why, like, obviously that website is really good, but also reaching out to Illinois Environmental Council. Correct. Yes.
If anybody needs to find their representative, it's really easy to do. Just pull up any old search bar and then type in who is my Illinois state senator, who is my Illinois state representative. It'll be like one of the first two results. You put in your information and it tells you a whole bunch. It's great.
I was just wondering, do we know who sold the land to Mom?
So part of it is Gensler's. The other parcels I don't know yet. There's that 600 acres that I still can't figure out which parcels they own.
They're waiting to spread word that Walmart's pretty essential. I don't give them any.
So yes, so one thing I will say with the Genslers is, and there's actually a copy of this on the front table, there's actually a copy of the initial lease that they signed with Monarch. There's also the notice of termination of that lease. So when they signed that lease, it was when it was going to be doing sustainable jet fuel, not a data center. So I have people pointing in the back of somebody to, yeah.
Love me devil's advocate. I was just wondering if there's been any attempts to reach out to those developers or even researchers of AI facilities to possibly be at a future meeting to answer our questions.
Yes, so I've actually reached out to a couple of researchers at some of our national labs because fairly recently, and the fact that it just happened as recently as it has, there are folks, they're scientists at Berkeley Labs and Lawrence Livermore that they actually have a data center research group that formed, I think, about 6 months ago. And so I've reached out to a couple of their scientists and I have yet to hear back, but would love to figure out how to get them engaged because because AI and this whole data center thing has happened so fast. the research is struggling to keep up as well. And so the national labs, I feel like, has the best opportunity, just because they've got the massive staff and the clear focus, on data centers. So that's my hope, is to get them involved, because again, there's so many data center questions I don't know, like, and hopefully I'm being transparent enough in like what I do and don't know. And obviously making notes about all of the questions that folks have, so that we can bring in the right people that can give us the information that we are looking for.
Rockford has a very long history of ignoring the will and the well-being of citizens in favor of the well-being of business sector. So this is another instance of that. It's also only been relatively recently that the city council allowed public comment. So I'm curious about who the members of the Planning and Development Committee of the City Council are, and how they voted on this issue at the meeting, I think, on Monday. So can you name names?
So the list of who's on planning and zoning is actually on the city website. I don't know it off the top of my head, but the issue that was voted on Monday was the 2040 land use plan that was not approving the data center. So yeah, so that did not approve a data center. That was a larger citywide land use plan.
So do we have any indication of how these 5 people would vote when it would come up before them?
Not at this point. My understanding is city council has many of the same questions and concerns as everybody in this room. Because they don't know, I mean, they don't know enough about it either.
So I'll give this to the city council person. Planning and Development Committee. And maybe there are 5 of them. Wilkins, Durkee, Hoffman, Meeks, and Salgado. So if any of them are your city council representative, lobby them. Thanks.
I just want to know where people are organizing that I'm here.
There you go.
There's a really good group called No Data Centers Northern IL on Facebook. I figure Facebook is here, we might as well use it for good trouble. I will be putting an article later from consumerreports.org. There are already 3,069 data centers already operational in America. 1,489 plans were under construction and 68 hyperscale data facilities. This issue affects us whether we live next door to one or not. The entire grid is getting stressed. We're all going to be priced out of electricity. So buy some candles.
Time check, we've got a few more minutes, so we probably won't get to every single question, but we do invite you to keep in contact. We've got Lori here in front and Christine who can answer questions and talk about their experience with this in other communities. Anne will be here and wants to answer all of your questions. And can we just give her a round of applause for doing it?
Well,
thank you.
I appreciate this. I appreciate the fact that there are so many people that are concerned about this. This is obviously not part of my job. For those that know Severson Dells, our mission is education. So I am educating about data centers, which is not something that is normally part of my realm, but I have tried to do as much digging and as much learning as possible, because we want to educate the community. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're making data-driven decisions. That is hugely important to me, in whether the community says yes or no to this. Like, I want to understand and have all of the data that we can, and make sure that city council has all of the data they can to make an informed decision, because that's frequently where situations like this go wrong, is our elected officials, if you think about, and this is kind of a moment of empathy, really, think about the wide range of issues that they have to be knowledgeable on. And so this is an opportunity for us to help compile and bring resources to help educate them as well, because they need these resources just as much as we do. And so if you find credible sources or credible data, share it with your elected officials so that they can see that information too. Again, they're trying to manage data centers and they're managing budgets and they're managing all of these other things. So if we can help them access credible data, credible information, then we can help them do their jobs. And we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions.
Thank you for all the hard work you're doing on this.
Oh.
I was curious if the Power Act is passed, do we think the data centers will go elsewhere? And it sounds like that would be a really good thing.
I think because my understanding of things is there are so many pieces of pending legislation across multiple states and multiple counties, multiple cities, like data centers are going to be hard pressed to not find a situation where there are restrictions that are either already in place or are coming, which is why there is such a race right now to do it. They're trying to get these things done before all of that passes. And so that's where it's kind of you trying to get communities to, for lack of a better term, slow their roll. Like, let's slow this down because it doesn't need to happen tomorrow, right? And like, yes, I understand that we are all using data. I mean, if you're online shopping, if you have a streaming service, if you like, we are all using data. So we are all contributing to this problem just in how we live our lives. But the scale of the growth and the fact that there's also this kind of, I think, pending AI bubble, which of course, who knows when that will happen, we need to be responsible and thoughtful about it, so that we're not overbuilding and ending up with a shell of a building, right? And ended up with who knows what tax implications. There's so many different issues with that. And the weird thing is, in terms of pending legislation, the states that you would think of as being the ones leading the charge are actually not. The states, and again, this is just in the research I've done, as I've done a deep dive on this, and Andrea can attest to my ability to hyper focus on issues. So this has been my hyper focus for a little while. You have Oklahoma and Florida are doing really deep dives, and they're putting in pretty severe restrictions and moratoriums and doing all of this stuff. And I'm going, that wouldn't have been where I would have guessed that was going. But let's learn from it, right? Let's learn from it.
I don't think I need a microphone, but the Sustain Rockford website has a resources page. And as a subset of that resources page, there's a whole section on data centers. And that is even divided by different topics within data centers. And we've only tried to put articles in there that are responsibly written and reliable information. And this is at least one source that you can go to and I think find out an awful lot of different things. We will also keep the key decision point meetings on data centers that are local on our website under events and at the front page of our homepage. So you can use that as a resource, and there are many of them. SustainRockford.org.
Hi, I'm Lori here, and I'm one from Springfield. Our data center project, about 5 months ahead of you guys, we were doing this exact same meeting in October. So I can answer questions about our project, but it might not necessarily apply, but I would be willing to answer some questions. But what I do want to say is I'm going to disagree with a little bit of what was said tonight. You need to understand the difference between using your phone for
for AI and not AI. So me doing a Google search is not necessarily AI. Me watching sorry, Christine, but your daughter watching Netflix is not necessarily AI. When I say about my phone, I don't have a phone, an iPhone. The only thing that my phone has associated with AI is Apple tracking my data, Apple recording my conversations, Apple massaging my data, Apple selling my data to other people, Apple using all of our data to do all this learning stuff. So you need to decide if this data project is good for you, if the benefits outweigh the negative impact, but don't feel like you're responsible for it because you're doing Google.
Oh, yeah.
All right, it is 7:58, so I'll take one more. We'll see if I can answer it. Yeah.
One thing about the TIFs that might make this more relevant is those happen usually with the development of large malls and like the closing down of downtown areas and the building of huge businesses outside of the immediate area where people could walk to get to. And then when their TIFs ran out, a lot of those companies left. And that's how you end up with a bunch of empty buildings down, let's say, on State Street with nothing there. And they're just sitting there. And then there's also laws that protect these companies that say you can't build anything else there for X amount of years that's similar to what we took away. So it's really complicated with this.
It is. If you have questions about the TIF districts in the city of Rockford, they have on their website, if you search TIF districts, it gives you the write-up for, I think it's 27 TIF districts within the city of Rockford, and you can click on the link and you can see the document. So see the TIF district legislation for that TIF district, when it was passed, when it expires, all that information, and each of them are like roughly 50-page documents. You can see when city council approved it, and all of the information on the city's website around each of the TIF districts. Because there are ones that were passed in 2004, 2008, 2011. And so they all have different timing to them as well. And so it's important that you look at those. Again, the current TIF district for this area expires in December of 2020 or 2035. But there is a proposed there's a proposal. I'll get this out. In front of I'm trying to remember what committee it was. It'll come back to me. One of the committees last fall to repeal the current TIF district and have a new TIF district put in there that would actually be larger than the current boundaries. All right. Yeah, we are at 8:01. I'm going to be respectful of everyone's time. If you still have questions, again, use those comment cards, use the QR code. If you really want to get a hold of me, there's business cards on the front table. Again, I'm not an expert. I've just been trying to pull from the resources that I can. So thank you for making the time tonight. And the completed comment cards, Jesse has a basket. So if there's any questions that didn't get answered, we've got a basket to collect them right up here.